Welcome back, Lutz, to Beyond the Brochure. Here we have Cliff Rowe, once former media director for PLU. So Cliff, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So what do you do here at PLU?
I teach, mostly. This year I'm also working with all the student media as we try to go through a convergence process.
Okay, and what does this convergence process consist of?
Well, it's mimicking what's going on in the professional world of, because of the digital influence. Print, broadcast, both audio and video are coming together. You have journalists going out to do stories carrying a camera, audio recorder, video recorder. So we're trying to give students here the same opportunity to do that kind of thing.
Okay, how do you think that benefits the students as they're going into their careers and just their time here at PLU?
I think in a number of ways. For one thing, it ought to give them confidence, because as they have to go out and find themselves telling stories in these ways, it won't be the first time. I think another thing that it's really doing is not only advancing them, but I think we're advancing the storytelling process, because young people are bringing a lot of fresh ideas, new ways of doing things into the field. So it's a win-win.
Okay. What about your background in media? Did you just kind of wake up one day and decide, I'll write for the paper? Or was it kind of a process that you kind of got into and sort of fell in love with?
It wasn't far from just waking up one morning. I started writing for my hometown weekly paper when I was 12 years old, covering sports, because I loved sports. And I found out if you can write about sports, you get to travel with the baseball team. So that was good. But that hooked me. You get a byline, and you see people recognize you and say, good story, and it's infectious.
Okay. As a kid writing for sports, did you ever have any of that convergence going on, or was that just kind of before the whole shift came in?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, from the time I was 12 all the way through college, and for 20 years as a professional journalist, it was all print. I came close one time to looking at television. I sat in a television control booth for one newscast and decided that was not for me. I like the editing capability.
Keeping it old school?
Right.
Okay. So how'd you get into teaching since you were a professional journalist for 20 years?
Well, that's a longer story. My dad was a teacher, and so I grew up in a faculty family, and I saw the interaction he had with his students, and I always kind of liked that. And so when after I'd been working in the field for a while, I had a chance to start teaching part-time. And I did that for several years and found out I liked it. And I think I finally learned how to do it, and so then I felt comfortable doing it.
Okay. What's one thing you always tell your students when you're in your class? Or is there not really one kind of thing you tell them?
Oh, there are many one things that I tell them. I think one thing I emphasize is be true to yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. You're who you are. And if you approach stories and your task honestly, you'll do fine. You don't have to play role play and that.
Okay. Is it often that students will come to you for assistance in their writing, or just kind of trying to get involved with student media, or is it mostly just they see you as just a professional teacher, or is it?
Oh, I think it's starting to come. I don't see students enough, because I love working with other people's writing. I did more editing when I was in the newspaper business than writing, so I like that. Mm-hmm. But young students, well, all writers are very sensitive about being edited. I don't think they feel comfortable going to other people and asking them, how can I change this or what? But I like doing that.
Okay. What's the biggest advantage to getting these positive edits to their paper to make their story more full? Like, kind of what do you think the greatest advantage of that is?
Well, I think the stories become more complete. Everybody wants to rush the story. I think that's typical of media. And they don't want to take the time to develop it. They don't want to take the time to do lengthy interviews, that kind of thing. But when they do, then they realize a better story emerges, and then that starts affecting their writing.
Okay. So if somebody would want to get involved with the Mast and writing and having these edits done by you and the other editors, how would they go about doing that?
Well, they won't get edited by me. They'll get coached. That's a term that I really emphasize, because I think it's something that's emerged in the professional world a lot more, coaching than editing. I never put my pen to a writer's copy as an advisor, but you can do an awfully lot of coaching. And if they want to get involved with that, there are many coaches between this place, your staff, and the Mast staff. There are a lot of good coaches up here. And if a student really wants to develop the writing, develop the reporting techniques, just walk into the Mast office or the Mast TV office and say, here I am, and they'll put you to work.
Okay. So you say coaching, is that because you like sports, or is that?
Oh, I love sport. Yeah. But it's just coaching. With coaching, you're working with the writer.
Okay.
With editing, you're working with the writing. And I think you can accomplish more by working with the writer. Just tell the writer where there are flaws, what they can do differently, and let them develop it themselves.
Okay. So having been a professor and also a coach and a writer and an editor for so long, what's the one thing that you can take out of that experience and say, you know, if you want to do writing, here's one of the greatest things you'll experience as a writer? Or
well, I think I've said many times, if I were coming out of college right now, I would do the same thing I did when I came out of college way too many years ago, and that would be go into writing. It puts you right in the middle of what's going on in the world. You have to learn to deal with people. You have to trust people. You have to learn to trust the people you work with. It's a great environment, I think, as a writer.
Okay. And that's all for tonight's edition of Beyond the Brochure. Check us out anytime at plu.edu/masttv. For all of us here at the News 9 crew, I'm Christian Dilworth. This is Cliff Rowe. Good night.